Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for hanging out with us. We're Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. Barrett, Derek, and Rob, and we are thrilled to be joined by our first guest of the day. He is EJ Smith. He covers the Eagles for the Philadelphia Inquirer. You can follow him on Twitter at EJ Smith94. What's up, EJ? How you doing, man?
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's been a while. I appreciate you having me.
How was Christmas? Yeah. How were the holidays, man?
Christmas was good. I got in like just in time for Christmas dinner. I was like telling people like I felt like I was in a Hallmark movie, rushing through the airport, trying to make it home for Christmas. So yeah,
planes, trains, and automobiles, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You got lucky, man, because a lot of people got stranded on Christmas, dude.
Right. Yeah, I heard some people are still stranded, man. It's crazy
dude.
Out there. Yeah.
Right now, Southwestern Spirit, man, they may have an uprising coming up, man.
Yeah.
Not pretty, man.
Yeah,
it makes you, as much as it was like chilly the last few days in the area in which the four of us live, you see some of the stuff that's going on in Buffalo, man.
Oh, my goodness.
Whoa. Unbelievable. Yeah.
For everybody, man. And for all of our listeners and viewers in those areas, man. Yeah, we're thinking of you. Believe me.
No question, man. It's ridiculous out there right now, bro.
Unbelievable. All right, EJ. So a lot to dive into, man. Give me your sense right now. We sit here at 12:34 on Thursday. Do we see Jalen in this game? Do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that the organizational messaging around it has been to, I mean, like the way I put it is like they have every reason to lie about it. They have every reason to tell you, oh, he could play. They want the Saints to prepare for both quarterbacks, and I think they also don't want to rule Jalen out before they have to give him the credit that he deserves, and that the credit that they want to give him to sort of acknowledge, like, listen, you do heal differently than everyone else, and if you're ready to play, we're not going to hold you back. But I think that the severity of the injury, the risk for re-injury, especially with obviously there are stakes for the game, but the expectation that the Eagles should be able to pull out one of these next two games and do what they need to do. I think they're going to try and give him as much time as they can to make sure that he's 100% when the playoffs come around. And I think the expectation when he first got hurt was that he missed two games, so this is the second game. I think the reason that it was two games, that they said they expected him to miss, was mostly because, if they need him for that Giants game, that's when they start thinking, okay, maybe we need to push him back out there. But this week, I don't think that that's the case. And he hasn't practiced. It doesn't seem like it's pointing in the direction he's going to play.
Well, what about GJ?
I don't think so with him either. I mean, Barrett, with all those guys that like they brought off the IR, when they opened that practice window, they wanted that thing open as soon as possible. It's kind of, that's been the way that they've handled every single one of those guys. I think the fact that they didn't bring him off of IR, open the practice window at least, get him practicing yesterday. I think the fact that they didn't do that kind of suggests that he might be one more week away. It's like, of course, like we always feel like, oh, well, he has to miss 4 games, and the second that he can, the second that he's eligible to return, he will. But, even the way that Nick talked about it, he kind of pointed out just because he's eligible to return doesn't mean he will. So, yeah, I think he might be a week away as well.
So, EJ, do you think this Jalen injury is a little bit more than what they've been telling us in terms of a sprain?
I mean, I think that the way that they've been slow playing, I don't think he ever really had a chance to play last week. I'm not one of these people who buys that like, oh, this might linger into the playoffs. I mean, we'll see. We don't really know the answer to that yet. But I mean, like Ben Roethlisberger was the last quarterback I saw that had an SC joint, not the AC joint, but the SC joint. And he missed 3 weeks. So, I think 4 weeks back to 100% is a reasonable thing to expect. But yeah, I do think that there's a good chance we won't see Jalen until the playoffs. Just because even if he's ready to go for the Giants game, I mean, if the way the Eagles handle preseason as like the indication, if you look at the way that they handle the preseason games, I don't know why they would flip from that philosophy of, more rest is better. Don't put these guys in harm's way to get him a series or two against New York, even if, he's close to 100%.
Any trends that are troubling you from a team perspective? Like I know a lot went on in the Cowboys game and 4 turnovers. You could start and probably finish there. But is there anything you're seeing that you think come playoff time against really good teams, this could bite them?
Yeah, the turnover thing doesn't really alarm me too much. The Eagles were so good not turning the ball over for most of the season. And they talked about how much they teach this and how much of an emphasis they put on it. But, the reality is that teams turn the ball over, like some of them are fluky, the Boston Scott mishandled a handoff. That's kind of a fluky turnover that you don't necessarily say you can live with it, because obviously the coaches are going to drill that out and, they won't live with it. But those are the ones that over the course of a 17-game season, you're going to have turnovers like that. I think that, it's not a coincidence that the only 2 games the Eagles have lost have been when they turned the ball over 4 times. I think both of those games, you look at some of those turnovers and go, those aren't really, red flag, these keep happening type turnovers. The thing that does, linger with me, there's a good chance this Eagles team is going to see the Cowboys in the playoffs. And I do think that there are still valid questions about whether this defense and the way that it's formed, can hold up against the best quarterbacks in the league. Now, it might not come up. The NFC doesn't have a whole lot of elite quarterbacks, but Dak Prescott, obviously we can talk about Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady in the grand scheme of it, their careers. But as far as if they're playing a game today, Dak Prescott's that one quarterback in the NFC that makes me a little worried, because you saw how he looked against the defense, on Christmas Eve. Mm-hmm. And I think that just the way that the defense is structured, with, the reliance on zone coverage and the lack of aggression, a lot of teams, it sounds good to say, we're going to sit back in zone and we're going to make these quarterbacks complete tight window throws. And, we're going to make guys have to, create after the catch, break tackles after the catch. But with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, you saw it. They can do that. Dak Prescott's not afraid to make those tight window throws. So I do think that Cowboys matchup is the one that I'm still a little bit. Obviously the Eagles were still relatively close to winning that game. If they get a stop on 3rd and 30 there, they probably pull that one out. But so I'm not trying to say that I think the Eagles would be in trouble if they played the Cowboys, but I do think they always say styles make fights. I think that the Cowboys style, the way that they can run the ball on 1st and 2nd down, and the way that Dak Prescott can make plays through the air, that matchup is still one that I think could give the Eagles trouble.
Give me your evaluation on this game going into it with our slot corners situation.
Yeah, I don't think the Saints offense doesn't really scare me very much. They're if Chris Olave is back, that kid he's special. He's going to be really good, I think. But, if he's not back, Kamara is not what he used to be. Honestly, you could make a case that their best offensive player is Taysom Hill, who's the 3rd string quarterback and the 3rd string receiver. So, I do think that the secondary with Josiah Scott at the nickel and Reed Blankenship at safety, I think that particular grouping could have trouble against good offenses. But I don't know. New Orleans is one of those teams that feels they just want to make it into a fist fight, make the game real ugly, and try and limit points, limit possessions. And I don't know. I think that the Eagles have proven, against teams like Tennessee and even Washington the first time around, that they can win those matchups. They can win dog fights. So I think that they'll be okay against New Orleans, especially with what's at stake. But I think you're right. It's until CJ Gardner Johnson is back, that secondary does give me a little bit of worry, just because they don't have, they're pushing the depth that they have, and the scheme that they play doesn't necessarily maximize when you do have some guys who are maybe a little limited.
Right, EJ, give me your evaluation of what you've seen from Josiah Scott.
Yeah, he's been up and down. He did have a couple of decent plays earlier in the season when Avonte Maddox went down. But like I was saying, it's you can't trust him in man coverage on a 3rd down against a good slot receiver. And that's what they were trying to do against Dallas, where he was matched up against CeeDee Lamb, whether it was man or zone, whether it's quarters, a match zone. He was clearly overmatched. And I think the Cowboys made it pretty obvious. They were picking on him. They were we're going to keep targeting this guy. Yep. And, I do think that if CJ Gardner Johnson is back and they can sort of pinpoint a couple of plays here and there, money downs, high stakes situations where it's we're going to drop CJ down and he's going to cover the slot. Josiah is going to be more of a deep half or deep 3rd type of player. He can do that. I think that you can win with Josiah back there. They literally have done that at points this season, but I think it's when you have Reed and Josiah, now it's you're starting to compensate for a lot of different guys. And there's only so much that you can expect Darius Slay and James Bradbury to kind of, insulate those guys with. So, you saw it on the 3rd and 30, Josiah's in a tough alignment, I would say, they're disguising the coverage. They're trying to, rotate the safeties, and Josiah's got to line up in the nickel 10 yards off, and he's got to get, he's deep half. He's got to run 20, 30 yards, at the snap. That's a tough ask for a guy like him. But, I think if you don't have to ask him to do those tough jobs, if you've got all your other guys, I think you can win with them. But yeah, I do think that until CJ's back, that's going to be, a weak point of the Eagles defense.
What's your best guess of how they'll go about this thing without Lane on Sunday? Do you think it's just going to be Driscoll plug in, or do you think there could be real movement with Mailata going to the right, Dillard to the left?
I think Driscoll has played well enough to at least get the first stab at this thing. I think when we've seen him I think he actually plays better at tackle than he does at guard. I think that he's decent at both. And I think that, again, I think he's earned the first stab at it. I think that, Mailata also, like, obviously they've done that in the past where they've moved Mailata to the right and put Dillard at left tackle. But I think Mailata's at a point in his career now where he's a little bit more entrenched on that left side and he's got a little bit more status. I think that it's like, that's a tough ask for your starting left tackle to move over. Now, Mailata's the type of guy who will do it because, he's a team guy and he's a good guy. But, I do think that there's a little bit of, just you don't want to move him around too much, just because of, again, his status on the team. So I think you'll see Driscoll there at right tackle first. I think that, the Eagles won't tell you that because, again, they want, the Saints have to prepare for multiple different outcomes. But, yeah, for now, I think Driscoll's probably the guy at right tackle. But, if he struggles, they have the option to move Mailata over and put Dillard in there.
I just don't like the fact that, going forward, that we forget that this is the number one team in the NFL, and there's a lot of naysayers at this point saying that we're still that good of a team, even with Jalen not being there. This offense will be fine, but do you keep Driscoll there or do you move Mailata and bring in Dillard?
Yeah, if it were me, I probably would. I think I would put Driscoll there. But I also I understand people who talk about like the best five. And I think the Eagles' best five is Dillard at left with Mailata at right. I think if it were like a 4 or 5 game stretch where Lane was out, I probably would be more willing to move Mailata at that point. If Lane was just out for the season, I think, at that point you get your best five on the field and you go. But if we're talking 2 games and really 1 game with real stakes with it, I think, you see if Driscoll can get you by. And then you go from there with Lane back whenever he's able to get back.
Well, that brings me to this. If we played Hurts, then I think they would move Mailata. But since it's just, that's to me that's kind of because I Minshew should get that same type of urgency also. So that's why I say I would make that move for 2 games. I would make that move.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, especially because like this game, they need this game.
Yes.
If they don't get this one now, it's you got everybody playing against the Giants, and I think they really want to. I mean, obviously they get the first round bye, but I think they want to give this team 2 weeks off. They have so many lingering injuries. Even like Miles missed practice yesterday with a knee. AJ Brown was limited with a knee. They need these guys. I think they really do. They want to give these guys a couple weeks, and I think taking care of business against the Saints is important. So I mean, I hear what you're saying. I just think that. Again, it's like we're talking about these 2 weeks that you just kind of got to get through these next 2 games. You have a week off. So, yeah, I think it will be Driscoll there.
Do you think it's somewhat of a telling tale? And I agree with all of your assessments in terms of what they might do in terms of structuring the offensive line. But is that a telling tale on Andre Dillard, a first-round pick, that he wouldn't even be considered in part of this revamped equation?
Yeah, I think it's just you have to know the personality behind it. And I think, I think whatever it is with him, he just can't play on that right side. I think, with some guys, they talk about, whether it's mentality or whether it's really just like, nature. It's like, they always like, we've talked to Stoutland about it a bunch, and Stoutland always talks and says like, listen, like it's easier for some guys than others, for Mailata. I mean, he'd never played football before. He didn't care. You put him on right, you put him on left. He was perfectly fine on both. Other guys, they struggle with it. So, I mean, I think Dillard's I think he is a starting quality left tackle, and I think that he is just kind of inflexible when it comes to being able to move from one side to the other. Now, like even playing guard, like this is the first year that he's ever really been asked to play right or left guard, and this was it seemed like he did all right in those situations. Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure he's worked on playing right behind the scenes. I haven't seen him play right. Like I didn't see him play much right tackle, if any, during training camp.
Not impressed.
Yeah, he's a left side offensive lineman. I think just and whatever you want to say about that. I mean, I think they drafted him to be the left tackle heir apparent, so it didn't probably come up that he couldn't play on the right side. But now on the role that he's in as a backup tackle, your number 3 tackle, the first guy off the bench, he has to be able to swing, and that's not something Dillard can do right now. So I do think it says something about him in the role he's currently in. But I think that, it's one of those things where if Mailata wasn't playing so well, I think Andre Dillard would be at left tackle right now. I think he'd be playing pretty well. You know, I mean, you look at some of these other young left tackles in the league, like Andrew Thomas is a guy who comes to mind. Like, not all these guys, they come out of the gate. They don't all come out of the gate playing really well. You know, Dillard struggled as a rookie, but he hasn't really gotten that extended opportunity. You know, I always say that he made all the reporters look kind of bad because, like, you know, during training camp, he was getting beat like a drum, but then he went in the games and he looked fine. And it was like, you know, I felt bad because I was killing him. You know, I was saying, oh man, he gets beat every day, and then he goes in the game and he plays well. So I think he's figured a lot of this stuff out, you know, kind of like, you know, under the surface. And if he does ever have to play left tackle, I think he'd be passable to good. But yeah, he's not a swing tackle for whatever reason.
EJ Sanders, 2 questions. Should there be concern with the knee? One, and are you worried generally about sort of his mental state with the 2 turnovers, which we haven't seen all year from him? And he's had such a great year, but the last 2 have not necessarily been his finest moments. Yeah,
with the knee, I think today will be really indicative on that. You know, I mean, they try to get these guys a day off if they can, even if it's not major. You know, it's the type of thing. Like, I think we'll know more after today, because today is like a real practice. You know, like yesterday was a walkthrough. You know, I think they're probably just trying to get him a day. But you know, if he's not practicing today, then yeah, I think it's something that we'll definitely ask Nick about on Friday, and you know, keep an eye on. As far as the turnovers, I mean, that fumble against the Cowboys, like, there's no excusing it. It's like that's the exact type of thing he hasn't been doing this season. I mean, you're in tight quarters. There's not a whole lot of yardage to gain, and you're loose with the ball. That's like, you know, stuff that we saw with him, you know, his first few years that he hasn't done this year. I wouldn't, you know, sound the alarm quite yet. But yeah, I mean, I think that Miles not fumbling the first 14 games of the season wasn't really totally characteristic for him. And I also think that Miles fumbling twice in 2 games is also a little uncharacteristic. So I think he probably got him out of his system. You know, you're glad he got him out of his system, you know, before the playoffs. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that, I mean, like we always said, like when we're in the auditorium, they've got these big ball security, you know, posters where it's like showing you like, you know, all the you know, clasp hand, they call it the eagle claw, I think it's called the bear claw, you know, all these things that these guys have to work on. I'm sure that they'll drill it a little bit more in practice. You know, I'm sure Nick will point to those posters a few more times this week. And yeah, I think that Miles, I mean, I think he responded the way you want to see a player respond to that, you know, at least in the very beginning, which is like, you know, clearly hard on himself, took accountability to it, and his teammates, you know, picked him up. I think that, you know, I think you know, it's reasonable to think he'll respond from that.
At the end of the day, man, we're gonna win this game. I'm confident in it, man, and I hear people talking about Gannon and how he's, you know, faced the last couple of weeks. I think Gannon will be fine. You know, what's your take on Gannon and his play calling, especially when he has now Josiah Scott in the mix? You know, he has young guys, you know, in the mix, you know, that he has a, you know, coach. How do you think he approaches? Is he going to be aggressive this game or non-aggressive run blitz? You know, what do you think he's going to do?
Well, I think that, you know, this is kind of like what it's always like with Gannon, where it's kind of like a week by week thing. I think you can't throw out, you know, the first 14, 15 weeks of the season because, you know, Dak Prescott made a bunch of really great throws. Now, listen, I just said.
And runs.
Right, yeah.
And he had ran all year.
Those third down runs, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, I just said earlier that, like, this Cowboys matchup would concern me because of that in the playoffs, you know, I think. But at the same time, like, you know, the Eagles were a 3rd and 30, you know, pass breakup, or, you know, they were 1 or 2 plays away from winning that game still. You know, like, just because, you know, Dallas put up a lot of points, but sometimes in the playoffs you got to win a shootout. So, I mean, for the most part, I think that Gannon, you know, the scheme makes sense and matches up well against a lot of the teams in the NFC. Again, that Cowboys matchup is the one that I still think the Eagles might need to put up 35, 40 points to win the game. But, you know, that's the playoffs. That's the NFL. Sometimes, some weeks you're not going to get, you know, your defense giving up 17 points. So I think there's been a lot of good with Gannon's scheme this year. Obviously, the Eagles have, you know, generated a ton of pressure. You know, James Bradbury and Darius Slay playing at a high level. You know, and like the one thing about the Cowboys game that's interesting to me is, like, you know, all year Gannon had been really, really good in those known pass situations, you know, like those early down situations where he was kind of shaky, you know, and Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh have helped a lot with that, especially Linval. You know, Linval's been really big for them. You know, but that early down stuff is what he struggled with. Those known pass, you know, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 8, he was rock solid on those, you know, getting creative with his calls, you know, getting them off the field a lot of the time. But, you know, with the Cowboys, it was like the inverse. Like, they were really, really good
He played the
early
perfect
down.
game, man. Dak
Yeah.
Prescott played the perfect game.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People are not taking that into consideration. Is he going to be able to play the perfect game again the next time they play him? He played the perfect. What was he? Wasn't he like
19 for 19 after that pick? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. 19 for 19. Man, come on, man. You think he's going to do that again? No.
Yeah, one of our colleagues, Ben Fennell, his expression is that those guys are millionaires too, right? Like,
Right.
the other team's got some good players too. So yeah, I hear you there. I mean, that's a good point. It's well taken. So yeah, I don't think that, like, I wouldn't say that this Cowboys performance was like, the sounding of the alarm. Like, do I think that Kirk Cousins is going to do that to the Eagles defense? No. Do I think Brock Purdy is going to do that to the Eagles defense? No. San Francisco gives me concerns for other reasons, but again, we're talking about high leverage conference championship, divisional round. These games are supposed to be hard. These games aren't supposed to be, cakewalks. And I think that, Eagles fans have enjoyed a lot of those cakewalks this year. I mean, as a reporter, there have been a lot of fourth quarters where my game story is already typed up and I'm just sitting there, watching the backups play. That's not how it's going to be in January. So, I think, I think Hassan Reddick said it, that Cowboys game was good for them, because they need to get some of those games out of their system, kind of work through the kinks in those situations. So, yeah, I wouldn't say like anything. Listen, they're still, in the driver's seat. They're still in a really good position for sure.
EJ, for as good as this defense has been across the board, generating turnovers, sacks, so on and so forth, do you think there are a lot of times when Gannon respects an opponent too much with the way he schemes?
I think that is the scheme. It's like, it's that hits principle. It's like, we're going to give you space. You can complete the underneath stuff. We're going to rally to the ball. We're going to tackle. We're going to try and force turnovers. And yeah, I think that sometimes you want to see him be a little bit more aggressive with, a quarterback that, maybe you can be aggressive against. But yeah, I think, with the Saints this week, I think it'll be interesting to see if he challenges Andy Dalton. That's the type of guy who you can challenge. I think that you don't need to be, in off coverage every single play against the Saints offense. There's not a whole lot of guys who can burn you. So I think it'll be interesting to see, but yeah, for the most part, I think that's the way the scheme is. I know some people are really not fans of it, and I understand it. We've grown accustomed to in the city really aggressive defensive coordinators who call a lot of blitzes and, press man coverage. Jim Schwartz, play the run on the way to the quarterback, that penetrating front. So this is definitely a different type of defense than I think Eagles fans are used to. It's not always the most aesthetically pleasing, but again, I mean, they've been successful with it this year.
EJ, would you do anything differently with Quez? We've seen a couple things, certainly the Cowboys game, and
trade him.
I'm being kind. There are moments where he is a little soft. What do you do to counterbalance that with him and still keep him effective?
Well, it's not that complicated. I mean, Quez Watkins had 5 targets, 2 of them were interceptions and 1 catch. I don't think Quez Watkins needs 5 targets. You got Dallas Goedert, you got AJ Brown, and Devontae Smith. So it's like, what do? You target those really, really good guys, And it's like, listen, like, I don't want to bury Quez too much. He's got a role in the offense. He's the type of guy that safeties have to respect over the top. He's got game-breaking speed. But like the way that the role he had at the beginning of the season, where he wasn't always getting a lot, he won games without getting thrown the ball. I think that's his role. It's like, if the coverage dictates that you're going to be wide open 50 yards downfield, we're going to throw you the ball. You're going to walk into the end zone. You're going to, hit your helmet on the goalpost, right? Like, he's going to have one of those every couple games. But yeah, I think that Jalen had done it a couple of times, and then Gardner did it a couple of times, where it's like, the picture's not really clear. It's kind of a 50-50 ball. And in the Eagles offense, those guys get spoiled a little bit because, you can throw those 50-50 balls to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. They'll make them 90-10, they'll make them 100-0 sometimes, especially the way Devontae's been high pointing the ball. And obviously AJ is just a freak. I mean, those guys win those, contested catches a lot, but you don't want to make a living off of those throws, especially to Quez Watkins. It's like, he's not exactly the most physical at the catch point. And I think that's really the teaching point from that Cowboys game is like, if Quez has a defender in the vicinity, like, that's not his role, I mean, you've Dallas Goedert come back and he just went a really long stretch in that game without getting a target. So how do you fix it? You make sure you get your superstars the ball more often, because I don't think that Quez Watkins needs many games when he's getting 5 targets, especially on underneath stuff like that. Again, if he's wide open down the field, that's his role. That's what he's there for. But, other than that, yeah, I think that, letting Nick's talked about how the coverage dictated that's where the ball went. Well, I mean, I feel like that's just one of those things. It's like you can't be throwing contested balls to Quez Watkins, 4 or 5 times a game. It's just not a winning formula.
Yeah,
so why do you think they don't
put Pascal in?
Yeah, why don't they integrate Pascal more? I mean, he only has 15 catches.
I'm with you, and especially because he's the type of guy that is a tendency breaker because he does all the dirty work. Quez is more of that deep threat. When you have Pascal in the field, I mean, that's almost like a run indicator. So that's like a tendency breaker almost.
Yeah.
It's like you have that guy in the field, people go, oh, they got Pascal and they're going to run the ball. But I mean, listen, I think both of those guys, no matter who you have on the field, the ball just shouldn't be making its way to those guys as often as it has been. I mean, it's tough to keep A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert sort of at the target numbers that they need. Even if you throw the ball 45 times a game, it's like you could throw 80 to 90% of those passes to those 3 guys, and you would still probably not have one of those guys who doesn't have 8 or 9 targets like they deserve. So I feel like the offense just needs to kind of keep going through the guys that are the real difference makers, like it did earlier in the season. I think that they've gotten a little bit of ahead of their skis with these Quez Watkins targets.
We've gone almost the whole time without even asking. What were your impressions of Minshew and the way he played?
I thought he was kind of jittery in the first half. I think he played reasonably well for sure. I think he played about as well as you can expect a backup to play. I thought, he wasn't stepping into a lot of his throws in the first half. At the very end of the first half, I remember, he had basically 3 straight drops where he drops, he sort of drifts into Micah Parsons' rush lane, and he throws it away. And it's like, these are basically just wasted plays. So, listen, they put up 34 points. He played pretty well, but I even think that there was some room for improvement. There's some things that I think he'll probably be a little bit more comfortable doing in his second start. You didn't see him step up in the pocket very often. You didn't see him, wanting to kind of maneuver. Now, a little bit of that is you get so used to watching Jalen, who's Jalen will step up in the pocket because he knows he can get out whenever he wants. I think Minshew's a little bit more, apprehensive to get trapped in there because he's not as fleet foot as Jalen, getting out of those situations. But I thought he played pretty well. I definitely think, he showed you that you can win one of the next 2 with him if you need to, if Jalen's not going to be back. So, I thought he played well. I think that there was definitely some room for improvement, but again, encouraging for the most part.
All right. Do they win on Sunday?
Yeah, I'm going to pick them to win. I think, like I said, I think the Saints offense is kind of one of these drag it out, try and make the game ugly. And their defense is, they've got some talent and they're a well-coached group for sure. But I mean, the Eagles have always had talent advantages throughout the season. They're the most talented team in football. I would feel pretty comfortable saying. And, in a situation where they need the win, I know that some of the injuries are going to be, worth watching. How Driscoll plays, how Reed Blankenship and Josiah Scott play. But this particular week, I think they should be able to get it done. I think that they'll win this game. They'll kind of coast through the Giants game, go into that first round bye, and then it'll be time for the playoffs. It'll be, those games will start having some real stakes. It'll be exciting. So
amazing.
I think they pull this one out.
Okay, EJ, great, man. I appreciate
Thank you,
time.
man.
Yeah. Always good catching up with you, man.
Appreciate
Happy
it.
New Year. Happy New Year to you, bro.
Check out EJ's
I got
work.
a couple resolutions I need to get started on.
Oh, other than staying away from Derek, what's number one? I mean, was that my out loud voice? I'm sorry.
I got to stay away from them sweets, though.
I hear you. Well, the hardest time is the holidays, man. There's cookies everywhere all the time.
I told my wife I'm gonna get through these next 3 days, and then I'll start taking care of it in the new year.
That's the move. Yeah, just get a couple. You got a couple more days. You
gotta get rid of the cookies. Yeah. Yes. Then once the cookies are gone, I can start. So.
I hear you. All right, EJ, check out EJ's work. You can follow him on Twitter at EJSmith94, and of course, Inquirer.com. EJ, we appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming.
Appreciate you guys, bro. Take care,
man.
Take care. Happy New Year. That is EJ Smith. Let's get a timeout here, guys. Let's come back and we're gonna do our comp. We're gonna compare 17 to 22. We always do. It's more fun, Derek. Let's face it. Our audience likes it when when Barrett and I pick on you. They like it.
And my wife says it's me. See, I'm glad you guys are doing this so she can see what's really going on here.
I told Trish not to watch when I said that. She knew not to be on.
Well, Derek, what are you talking about? I don't understand what you're saying.
In his best, Eddie Haskell. Go ahead.
Right. It's well done. It's well done by Barrett.
It's so wrong on so many levels.
I know. It's not right. All right. So we come back. I'm going to bounce it off of you guys. We'll do the comp between the 17 team that won it and this team. And we'll see, pound for pound, who has more talent on paper. All right. We'll do that.
Forgive me if I ever offended you, Derek. I'm sorry.
You look very lovely today, Mr. Gunn.
To both of you.
Getting deep. Get the waiters out. All right, Derek
Oh, my
Gunn,
goodness.
Barrett Brooks, Rob Ellis. We're Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. Don't go anywhere. Let me tell you about Pro Action Restoration. Yeah, Pro Action Restoration is the place that you call, reach out to when your home, a business you may own, a property you may own, goes through the inconvenience of water, fire, smoke, mold damage, whatever the case may be. Pro Action Restoration is on call 24 hours, 7 days a week to assist. I've experienced it myself. I had a water issue at my parents' house. I called them on a Saturday. They got right out. They fixed it. The crew was unbelievable, and the price was right. I mean, every box was checked off. They are licensed, bonded, fully insured. They've been serving the tri-state area for more than 2 decades. Pro Action will work in conjunction with your insurance company. Again, it could be any of the above: water, fire, smoke, mold damage, you name it. They can handle it. Give them a call, 610-623-3760, 610-623-3760, or online at proactionrestoration.com. That's proactionrestoration.com.